Hi there, you're watching Reddit Confessions. She didn't blink when she said it. $100 and a burger. He's yours. She even had the nerve to toast with her wine glass after saying it. Everyone around the patio laughed. That kind of brittle, high-pitched laughter people use when they're not sure if it's actually a joke. And then, Hannah, our 24-year-old neighbor with her perfect hair, her perfect tan, and her perfect little confidence, calmly opened her phone, tapped something, and slid it across the table. Bank transfer. $1,000. Instantly sent. She leaned forward, looked my wife dead in the eyes, and said, "Deal." Nobody laughed that time. Not even my wife. Because you can't laugh when your joke suddenly gets taken seriously. Especially when the punchline is your husband. And me? I was 3 feet away, holding a tray of grilled zucchini like a human houseplant. That's how it started. Not with a kiss. Not with a fight. Not with lies or late-night texts. It started with a receipt. I don't think anyone moved for at least 10 seconds. The smell of burnt meat was the only thing cutting through the silence. My wife, her name's Daphne, by the way, was still frozen mid-sip, her rose trembling just slightly at the rim of the glass. The screen of Hannah's phone was still glowing on the table. Everyone saw it. She wasn't bluffing. $1,000. Sent. Instant. The burger hadn't even hit the plate yet. And me? I felt like I was watching someone else's life unfold, someone pathetic. A man-shaped joke in cargo shorts and an apron that said Grill Sergeant, silently realizing he was the punchline. Again, Daphne finally spoke. Not to me, not to Hannah, but to everyone else. "All right, that's enough weirdness," she said, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. "Let's eat." But something had already shifted. You know that feeling when a room goes from party to performance? Every smile that followed was strained. Every clink of a fork felt too loud. I put the tray of food down and walked inside. Nobody stopped me. I stood alone in the kitchen pretending to refill the salad bowl, trying to convince myself that it was all just a dumb joke gone too far. But when I checked my phone, out of some sick curiosity, I saw the notification, joint account. $1,000 received. From Hannah. She hadn't just made a point. She'd made a payment. That night, after everyone left, Daphne didn't bring it up. We sat on opposite sides of the couch, watching some mindless crime show, both pretending we weren't thinking about the same thing. I kept waiting for her to say, "That girl is crazy." Or, "Can you believe she actually sent the money?" But she didn't. What she said instead was, "She's ballsy." I didn't know how to respond to that. I still don't. Over the next week, Hannah texted me twice. Just emojis. The first was a burger hamburger. The second was a money bag. I didn't respond. I showed them to Daphne, half expecting her to flip out, delete the texts, throw a wine glass, something. Instead, she smirked and said, "You've still got it, babe." It should have been funny, but it wasn't. Because for the first time in a long, long while, I started wondering what it would feel like to be wanted. Not tolerated. Not dismissed. Wanted. And that's when I did the dumbest thing I've done in 15 years of marriage. I responded. I told myself it was harmless. One reply, just to de-escalate. Just to end the weirdness with some dignity. So I sent Hannah a message. "You got your burger? Refund time?" Trying to be clever. Trying to signal, "I'm not playing your game." She replied within seconds. "I don't do refunds. But I tip well." That should have been my cue to block her. Instead, I stared at the message for a full minute, pretending I was thinking of a witty comeback. But really, I was just sitting in silence, wondering how I'd become the kind of man who liked being flirted with through passive-aggressive transactions. But it didn't stop there. 2 nights later, something changed. Daphne came home late. She reeked of whiskey and perfume, not hers. Her hair was pulled back, sloppily, and she was wearing heels I hadn't seen in years. I asked if she'd been out with coworkers. She said, flatly, "No, I was at Hannah's." I laughed. I thought she was messing with me. She wasn't. She dropped her purse by the door, walked into the kitchen, and said she wanted a better look at what she bought. Then she opened a bottle of wine like it was just any Tuesday. I didn't know whether to be disgusted, furious, or afraid. I asked if she was joking. She didn't even look up. "No joke." She said she's willing to double it. The room started spinning. "She wants what?" I said, my voice cracking like I was 13 again. "Another 1,000, Daphne said. To spend a weekend with you. Alone. In her cabin. She even offered to pay me a bonus if I sign off." I couldn't believe it. It wasn't just a joke anymore. It was a negotiation. My wife, the woman I'd built a whole life with, was now acting like a bored middleman in some sick fantasy market. You said no, right? I finally asked. She shrugged. I haven't answered. I wanted to see how you felt about it. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about Hannah. Not really. This was about power. About leverage. About control. And somewhere along the way, Daphne had realized that giving me away, piece by piece, was more fun than keeping me. And the worst part? I couldn't tell if I was disgusted by the idea or curious. The next morning, everything felt surreal. I walked past Daphne in the kitchen as she scrolled through her tablet like nothing happened, sipping her black coffee as if she hadn't offered me up to another woman the night before. I waited for her to say it was all a joke, a twisted, drunken mind game. But she didn't. She just glanced up and said, "You left your phone on the nightstand." It was already unlocked. I knew she'd gone through it. She didn't mention the texts, the emojis, the bank alert. She didn't need to. That afternoon, I found myself walking laps around our block, something I hadn't done since the early pandemic days. I needed air. I needed control, because nothing made sense anymore. Not my wife. Not Hannah. Not myself. And that's when I saw her, Hannah, on her front porch, barefoot, legs crossed, sipping lemonade like some character out of a dream you forget to wake up from. She didn't look surprised to see me. Didn't even look amused. She just motioned to the empty chair beside her like it had already been reserved. I told myself I wouldn't sit. I sat anyway. She didn't waste time. "So, what's it going to be?" she asked, as if we were discussing dinner options, not the ethics of auctioning off a marriage. I laughed, short, bitter, stupid. "Are you seriously treating this like a transaction?" "You're the one who came over," she said, calmly. And I hated that she was right. Then she pulled out her phone again. Another transfer screen. This time, $2,000, already queued, waiting for a thumbprint. She held it out like bait. "Say yes, and this goes to your joint account. Say no, and I'll just find someone else." I blinked. "Someone else?" She smiled. "Daphne and I have a little club now. A shared interest. You're just the prototype." I stood up. Fast. Too fast. My pulse was racing. "I'm not yours to buy," I said. She raised her eyebrows. "That's funny. Because last I checked, your wife disagrees." I walked away. No dramatic words. No heroic speech. Just a knot in my throat and the sick taste of adrenaline in my mouth. Because I knew, deep down, I wasn't walking away from Hannah. I was running from the fact that I didn't know who I belonged to anymore. And when I got home, Daphne was waiting in the hallway, holding her phone. "She made the payment," she said, without even blinking. I didn't say anything. I just stood there in the hallway, staring at Daphne while she stared back at me like we were playing some silent game of emotional chicken. Her phone was still in her hand, the screen glowing. She tilted it slightly so I could see the notification. "Transfer received, $2,000. From H. Mendez. Same joint account. Same bitter taste in my mouth." "You knew she'd send it," I said, finally. Daphne didn't answer. Instead, she slipped her phone into her pocket and walked past me like I was just another piece of furniture. Not worth moving around. Just navigating through. I followed her to the kitchen. "You're really okay with this? With selling me off like I'm part of a silent auction?" She opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of white wine, and started pouring without looking up. "You're not listening. I'm not selling you off. I'm letting you prove your value. There's a difference." That sentence stopped me cold. Prove my value? I was too stunned to even respond. I just leaned against the counter, trying to make sense of it. Daphne was always calculated. She'd been a lawyer before pivoting to some corporate consulting gig I never fully understood. But this wasn't calculation. This felt curated. She finally turned to face me, holding her glass. "You always say I treat you like a ghost. That I stopped seeing you. That I don't appreciate you. So here you go. Someone's paying thousands just to be in a room with you. That's attention, isn't it? That's validation." "It's twisted," I said. She shrugged. "Twisted gets results." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shake her and ask what happened to the version of her I married. The one who used to cry during indie films and overtip baristas. But I didn't. Because I realized something in that moment that I hadn't wanted to admit for a long time. She didn't lose herself. She evolved. I didn't. I was the ghost of the guy she married. Same routine. Same slippers. Same sarcasm about everything. while she kept climbing, kept strategizing, kept upgrading every corner of her life, except me. And now, I was being outsourced, like an old software plug-in no longer compatible with her system. Later that night, after she went to bed, I stayed up replaying the entire thing in my head. The barbecue, the joke, the wink, the first payment, the second. But it wasn't until I checked my own email that I found the final blow. Subject line, weekend itinerary, cabin check-in confirmed. Sender, Hannah Mendez. Body, rooms ready. Don't pack much. Everything else is already paid for. And at the bottom, P.S. She said I could write the ending however I want. I didn't sleep the night before I left. Not because I was nervous. That would have implied I had some kind of say in any of this. I didn't. It was like being pulled by a current you didn't see coming. You don't resist. You just float and pray you don't hit rocks. The morning of the trip, Daphne handed me a duffel bag she'd already packed. Nothing was folded, just crammed. The way you pack for something disposable. A toothbrush, 3 t-shirts, a single bottle of cologne I hadn't used since our honeymoon. I asked if she was serious. She said nothing, just walked away. The cabin was 2 hours outside the city, perched at the edge of a half-frozen lake that didn't even show up on Google Maps. The trees looked like they were waiting for something. Watching. The air was too still for November. When I pulled up the gravel road, Hannah was already outside, leaning against the porch post, dressed in black like it was a funeral, and she didn't mind being the reason. She didn't say hi. She didn't smile. She just tossed me the key like she'd done it 100 times before. Like I belonged there. Inside, everything was pristine, modern, minimal, silent. 1 bedroom. No TV. No internet. Just a fire already lit, and a bottle of something dark on the counter with 2 glasses beside it. She poured one. Saturday. Motioned for me to do the same. And then, without looking at me, she said, "She told me you try to find meaning in all this. Don't. It's not a metaphor." I didn't answer. I didn't even sit. Because I realized something in that moment. I wasn't here for pleasure. I wasn't here for escape. I wasn't even here for her. I was here to witness something. That first night, nothing happened. Not the way you'd think. No touch. No flirting. Just questions. Strange ones. She asked what I dreamed about when I was 10. What I hated most about my father. What my wife said in her sleep. She asked if I'd ever imagined running away. I told her I had. She asked if I ever actually would. I said I didn't know. At some point, I dozed off in the armchair. When I woke up, she was gone. But my phone, which I hadn't remembered setting down, had a single new notification. A payment. $500. From an unrecognized name. And a message. For the answers. Tell Daphne I'm next. I felt sick. Not because I understood what was happening, but because I didn't. This wasn't about attraction. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about me. It was something else entirely. And I had no idea how deep it went. I didn't leave the cabin the next morning. Not because I was waiting for Hannah. She never came back. Not after that first night. I checked the porch. Her car was gone. The bottle of whiskey was still half full. My keys were where I left them, untouched. But the silence had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt like I'd missed something. Like someone had pulled the rug out from under a game I didn't know I was playing. I checked my phone again. Another message. Different number. Different name. Payment confirmed. Session verified. Outcome compliant. Thank you for your service. I read it 3 times. It didn't make sense. Session verified. Outcome compliant. I wasn't compliant. I didn't do anything. That's when I noticed the other new thing. A file had been uploaded to my phone. No sender, no explanation. Just a thumbnail titled, Review_7. MP4. I opened it. It was me, sitting in the cabin, slouched in the armchair, half drunk, answering questions I barely remembered being asked. The video was perfectly framed, shot from the ceiling, likely from a pinhole cam I hadn't noticed. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't romantic. It was clinical. And worse, it had been edited. Cuts between clips. Keywords popping up at the bottom of the screen like a training module. Resigned. Isolated. Obedient. Suddenly, I got it. The payments. The rotation. The handoff. This wasn't a seduction. It was a case study. I'd been turned into data. My vulnerability repackaged into something sellable. Proof that emotional erosion could be scaled. Tracked. Repeated. I wasn't being sold for pleasure. I was being sold for results. I stared at the fireplace until the flames blurred into colorless light. Everything I thought I understood about what Daphne was doing, what Hannah was after, it had all been wrong. They weren't in this for power. Not in the usual sense. They were playing a different game altogether. And I'd already lost. That evening, just before sunset, a black car pulled up. Not Hannah's. A man got out. Middle-aged. Polished. He didn't look at me as he climbed the porch and let himself inside, as if he'd done this before. He left an envelope on the table and walked back out without saying a word. Inside the envelope was a single page. Typed. No signature. You've performed adequately. Daphne has been compensated accordingly. If you choose to re-enter the cycle, reply, yes, within 72 hours. If you do not respond, your file will be closed. No further involvement will be expected. And at the very bottom, a postscript. Some husbands go quietly. Some need help understanding what they're worth. I didn't respond. Not in the first 24 hours. Not in the second. I let the 72-hour timer run out, watching it like a countdown on a bomb that, for once, I wasn't afraid to let go off. I didn't reply yes, because I'd finally remembered something no one else in that entire twisted game seemed to care about. I was still a person, not a test subject, not a product, not a case study or an outcome. Just a man. Flawed, bitter, tired, but human. And humans don't need permission to walk away. The envelope, the videos, the money, all of it stayed in the cabin. I drove back home with nothing but my bag of wrinkled clothes and a strange sense of weightlessness. Not freedom exactly. Something quieter. Something like reclamation. When I walked through the door, Daphne was in the kitchen. Same robe. Same coffee. But she looked up and blinked like she didn't expect to see me come back in one piece. I didn't say a word. Just dropped the keys on the counter and said, I'm done. Not angry. Not broken. Just done. She didn't ask for details. Maybe she already knew. Maybe she thought I'd be back eventually. Maybe she thought she'd win again. But she underestimated the one thing that made me dangerous now. I had nothing left to lose and nothing left to prove. The next morning, I filed for separation. Quietly. Strategically. Like she would have. I took screenshots. I forwarded emails. I didn't even touch the money in the joint account. I didn't need it. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to survive in someone else's design. I was finally sketching my own. It's been 7 months. The divorce is almost final. I live in a small, rented house with thin walls and ugly carpet. But I breathe easier here. The silence is mine. The choices are mine. And the best part? Hannah texted again a few weeks ago. I didn't open it. Not out of fear. Not out of regret. I just didn't need to anymore. Thanks for watching Reddit Confessions. If you've ever experienced a moment where someone tried to put a price on your worth, or a time you walked away from something toxic and found peace, share it in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell, because the truth always finds a voice.